exhausted, but not in the way you think. It's not your job. It's not just lack of sleep. It's deeper, heavier, and more invisible. You've tried rest, vacations, therapy, distraction, but the emptiness remains. That's because what you're suffering from isn't physical fatigue. It's spiritual exhaustion. The soul has been quietly screaming for years, and no one taught you how to listen. In this video, we unravel the brutal truth. What's draining you is not life itself, but your relation to it. This will expose the hidden battle happening inside you every day, and show why most people live quietly in despair, mistaking spiritual death for simple tiredness. We live in an era that has built its identity around the idea of exhaustion. People say they are tired with a strange pride, as though suffering is a badge of productivity. "I'm so busy," they mutter, like monks repeating a sacred mantra. But this fatigue is not what it seems. It is not the honest tiredness that comes from physical labor or deep engagement with the world. It is something murkier, more insidious. It is a tiredness that lingers no matter how much one sleeps, a heaviness that no coffee or vacation or self-help book seems to lift. This is not a problem of the body. It is a scream from the soul that has been ignored for too long. Modern life has invented 1,000 names for this condition: burnout, fatigue syndrome, depression, anxiety. But these names only describe the surface. They distract from the truth. The truth is that people are spiritually drained because their existence lacks any authentic meaning. They are not tired because they work too much. They are tired because their lives are hollow, because their actions are dictated by forces outside of themselves. Social expectations, economic survival, empty ambition. The rituals of daily life have become mechanical, driven not by a sense of purpose, but by fear, comparison, and habit. And in this great theater of imitation, where people chase images instead of essence, the soul slowly withers. People are not just working jobs they hate. They are living lives they did not choose. They wake up each day performing roles they never auditioned for, moving through routines that no longer feel human. They speak words that have been repeated so often they've lost all meaning. They scroll through artificial feeds, consume curated experiences, and fill their days with digital noise that gives the illusion of life without ever touching it. And through all of this, a silent emptiness expands within them, a growing sense that nothing they do matters, that no pleasure satisfies, that their existence is weightless. Even those who appear successful are not spared. The man in the tailored suit, the woman with the perfect profile, the influencer bathing in praise. Many of them are just as exhausted, if not more so, because deep down, they suspect the same terrifying truth: that all their achievements are scaffolding over a void, that they have gained the world and lost themselves, that in the race to become someone, they've forgotten what it means to simply be. The body begins to mirror this spiritual collapse. The immune system falters. The breath shortens. The shoulders slump under invisible weight. The mind dulls, no longer curious, but merely reactive. And then come the panic attacks, the insomnia, the inexplicable tears at 3 a.m., not because of trauma, but because of a quiet, continuous betrayal of one's own essence. A life lived out of sync with the soul is a form of slow suicide. A quiet dying that doesn't bleed but corrodes. What we call burnout is often the symptom of something far deeper, a chronic starvation of the self. The modern world offers every convenience, every comfort, and yet people walk through it as though under a spell. Because convenience is not nourishment. Comfort is not meaning. A perfectly optimized life can still be profoundly empty. And most people, when they say they are tired, mean something else entirely. They mean they no longer see a reason to rise. They mean they no longer feel alive in what they do. They mean they are ghosts haunting their own lives, and no amount of sleep will wake them up. There exists in every human a force older than logic and deeper than thought. It is the will, the primal engine of being, not merely the will to achieve or succeed, but the fundamental will to exist, to act, to assert one's presence against the pull of nothingness. When this will is intact, even in suffering, there is fire, there is movement, there is resistance against despair. But when this will collapses, all that remains is inertia, not peace but vacancy, not calm but quiet decay. The collapse of the will is not an explosion. It is erosion, slow, silent, merciless. Many think they have lost motivation, that they are simply tired or unambitious. But they are not lazy, they are wounded. The will has been starved, battered by systems that demand performance without purpose, obedience without understanding, and sacrifice without meaning. The modern man is praised for being productive, but punished for being real. He is taught to suppress his inner chaos, to silence his anguish, to plaster over his doubt with the thin smile of functionality. In time, this internal self-repression turns into paralysis. The will, denied its voice for too long, withers into silence. This collapse is not always visible. It hides beneath surface, level functioning. The man shows up to work. The woman checks her boxes. The student passes the test. But inside, something fundamental is broken. There is no curiosity, no yearning, no internal momentum. Life becomes something endured rather than lived. Every action is dictated by pressure, not desire. Every decision is a compromise. And over time, the soul forgets what it once longed for. The will, once a roaring flame, becomes a dim ember barely able to glow beneath the weight of external expectation. The tragedy is that this collapse often goes unnoticed by others. Society celebrates compliance, not vitality. As long as one follows the rules, achieves milestones, and avoids making waves, no one questions whether the person is spiritually alive. In fact, those who appear most disciplined are sometimes the most dead inside. They follow routines with military precision, not because they are strong, but because they are afraid of falling apart. Their order is not a reflection of control, but a desperate attempt to not feel the chaos bubbling underneath. People try to fix this collapse with surface remedies. They seek new goals, chase new relationships, start new habits. But no amount of strategy can resurrect a dead will. The will does not respond to tactics, it responds to truth. It is not revived by better schedules, but by a return to what is real. Yet in a world built on illusions, this is the most dangerous and difficult thing one can do. To confront the truth means to confront the possibility that the life you've built was never truly yours. That your desires were inherited, that your fears were implanted, that your identity was curated, not discovered. And such a realization threatens everything. The collapse of the will is not failure. It is a message, a quiet revolt of the soul against a life that no longer fits. It is the psyche's final act of rebellion against a system that feeds the body, but starves the essence. This is why no amount of rest feels like enough. Because the fatigue is not physical, it is ontological. It stems from living at odds with your own being. From waking up each day and walking a path that feels like it belongs to someone else. From ignoring the parts of yourself that do not conform. And once the will collapses, the outer world becomes heavier, more absurd. Noise feels louder. People feel more distant. Every task, no matter how small, feels like an assault. Not because the world has changed, but because your inner force, your animating principle, is absent. The will is what transforms pressure into power, suffering into meaning. Without it, suffering becomes unbearable. Without it, even joy loses its taste. Without it, life becomes a script, and you, merely the actor pretending to believe in the plot. When the inner world becomes unbearable, the first instinct is to run, not with feet, but with distractions. Modern man has mastered the art of running while standing still. He switches screens, scrolls endlessly, consumes sound and light and information, as if saturation could substitute for serenity. This is not leisure, nor indulgence. It is a desperate flight from confrontation. From the quiet voice within that whispers truths we are too afraid to face. Escape has become an industry, and its profits rise in direct proportion to the emptiness we try to suppress. There is no shortage of escape routes. Entertainment, ambition, sensuality, substances, status. Each offers a momentary dissociation from the abyss beneath, but the void cannot be escaped. It follows, like a shadow, shapeless yet present. We build louder environments, brighter screens, busier lives. We keep moving in the hope that stillness won't catch up to us, but the soul does not forget. It waits. And the more we flee, the more it sinks beneath the surface, fermenting into anxiety, exhaustion, numbness. Not because we are broken, but because we are fragmented. The illusion of escape is powerful because it mimics control. To change locations, jobs, relationships, routines, these are presented as new beginnings. And sometimes they are, but more often, they are only new settings for old dysfunctions. The external world changes shape, but the internal self remains unexamined. The same wounds get dressed in new language. The same fears wear new masks. A different partner, but the same desperation for validation. A new career, but the same hollow ambitions. A spiritual practice, but performed with the same ego that poisoned success. The form evolves, but the essence stagnates. We are sold the idea that movement equals transformation, that novelty heals, that the next thing will finally be the thing that makes it all make sense. But transformation does not come from addition, it comes from subtraction. From stripping away the illusions, the false narratives, the identities built to impress, but not express. This kind of transformation cannot be consumed. It must be endured. And it begins not with motion, but with stillness. Stillness terrifies us because it offers no distraction. It holds a mirror instead of a screen. In silence, the voices buried beneath the noise grow louder. Regrets speak. Longings ache. The self, once drowned by obligations and projections, begins to stir, and it is not always kind. The truth it reveals may be unwelcome, that much of what we pursued was avoidance, that the life we live may not be ours, but borrowed from expectation, that the roles we play may be more performance than authenticity. In stillness, the illusion dies, and with it, the comforting anesthesia of escape. But society does not reward this confrontation. It rewards efficiency, productivity, optimism. To speak of despair is to risk exile. To slow down is to be labeled lazy. To step outside the current is to be called lost. And so, people return to their distractions with increased fervor. Like addicts seeking stronger doses, they smile through hollowness. They work through burnout. They laugh without joy. This is not resilience. It is denial with a public relations team. And the more they run, the deeper the fatigue becomes. Not of the body, but of the soul. Eventually, even the distractions lose their power. What once numb now feels like noise. The pleasures grow thinner. The rewards less satisfying. The mind, overstimulated, becomes restless. The heart, untouched, becomes cold. And in this desensitized state, the illusion of escape crumbles. There is nowhere left to run that doesn't lead back to yourself. You begin to see that no external change will heal what is fundamentally internal, that no amount of progress will satisfy what was never understood, that the world outside is only a reflection of the world within. To escape without introspection is to wander in circles. Every path leads to repetition. Every relationship echoes the last. Every goal, once achieved, reveals its hollowness. And in this repetition, a quiet despair grows. Not the loud despair of tragedy, but the slow erosion of meaning. It is not enough to be alive. One must also feel alive. But when escape becomes a lifestyle, aliveness is replaced by performance. You become a character in your own life. Convincing, functional, empty. The greatest suffering man endures is not inflicted by the world, but by the tension between what he wants and what reality provides. This suffering does not begin in the external realm. It begins in the will. The will to be loved, to be seen, to matter, to conquer, to transcend the dull machinery of life. It is the will that drives ambition and pleasure, but it is also the will that creates dissatisfaction, anxiety, and despair. For the world is indifferent, and the will is insatiable, and from this contradiction emerges a kind of spiritual torment, a war with no victor. The will is blind. It moves forward not because it understands, but because it must. It compels man to act, to chase, to consume, to believe that there is something more, just beyond the present moment. This movement becomes life itself, a striving that never ceases. Each goal achieved is immediately followed by another. Each pleasure fades into the hunger for another. The will is a fire that feeds on fulfillment and turns it into ashes the moment it is touched. And yet, without the will, there is no drive, no meaning, no becoming. Thus man is trapped in a paradox. He cannot be at peace with the will, but he cannot live without it. Reality, on the other hand, is static. It unfolds according to laws that care nothing for human desire. The world does not adjust itself to our longing. It remains what it is: flawed, fragile, fleeting. Nature moves in cycles, time marches indifferently forward. People leave, die, betray, forget. And it is here that the will crashes into the walls of existence. The dream of perfect love confronts the reality of human limitation. The fantasy of eternal success confronts the truth of impermanence. The illusion of control is shattered by the randomness of events. And when the will meets this resistance, it begins to suffer. Not from the pain of failure alone, but from the collapse of illusion. This war between will and reality is not just emotional, it is metaphysical. It is the condition of being itself. Every moment of craving is a protest against what is. Every hope contains the seed of future disappointment. The more one wants, the more one suffers. And yet, this does not mean the solution is to stop wanting. To kill the will is to kill the flame that animates existence, but to be enslaved by it is to burn endlessly without rest. Thus, the challenge is not to deny the will, but to understand its nature, to watch it without becoming it. Most people never do. They spend their lives reacting, pursuing what the will demands without question. They mistake every desire for destiny, every craving for purpose. They chase approval, success, romance, security, believing these will finally deliver peace. But peace does not lie at the end of the will's journey. It lies beyond it. And until one sees the will for what it is, a force, not a truth, one remains caught in its machinery, always striving, never arriving. This war between will and reality is also the root of spiritual exhaustion. The body may sleep, but the will does not. It keeps generating what ifs and should haves. It keeps whispering that life is not yet enough, that you are not yet enough. It hijacks the mind during moments of stillness, turns silence into restlessness, and transforms even happiness into suspicion. For the will does not allow rest. It survives by convincing you that rest is failure, that contentment is weakness. And in this way, it becomes a tyrant in the temple of the soul. But reality has its own kind of quiet strength. It does not speak loudly. It does not seduce. But it is there, in the wind, in the passing of time, in the fading of youth, in the inevitable silence after every high. Reality reminds you of your limits, and in doing so, it offers an invitation, not to despair, but to awaken, not to overcome the will, but to see through it, to witness how your suffering is not always caused by the world, but by your resistance to the world, by your refusal to accept what is as it is. There is a kind of freedom that comes, not from fulfilling every desire, but from no longer needing to, from detaching the sense of self from the chaos of wanting, from realizing that you are not the will. You are the awareness of it. You are not the hunger. You are the one who sees the hunger arise and fall. In this realization, the war between will and reality begins to dissolve, not through victory, but through understanding. In the noise of modern life, the soul suffocates under the weight of distraction. The problem is not merely exhaustion of the body or depletion of time. It is the annihilation of inner space. We live in a world addicted to movement, to stimulation, to endless reaction. The average person has become incapable of solitude, allergic to silence, and terrified of being left alone with themselves. In this condition, there is no chance of spiritual strength, no clarity, no awakening. The path toward liberation does not begin with conquest, but with withdrawal. But this withdrawal must not be confused with escapism. It is not the coward's retreat, but the philosopher's revolt. Escape is rooted in fear. It is the act of running away from the unbearable. The responsibilities of life, the pain of existence, the wounds of the past. The escapist turns to indulgence, distraction, intoxication, fantasy, anything that anesthetizes the ache of being conscious. But these things are not remedies. They are simply delays. They postpone the confrontation with the self, while secretly deepening the rot. The pain is not healed, only buried. The will is not quieted, only numbed. And the soul, left unattended, begins to decay beneath the surface of false joy. This is the fate of most men. They appear happy while silently disintegrating inside. Withdrawal, however, is the opposite. It is an act of radical lucidity. It is not an abandonment of life, but a reorientation toward what is essential. The one who withdraws does so not because they hate the world, but because they see its illusions too clearly to be fooled any longer. They are no longer seduced by trivial pleasures, superficial approval, or the hollow rituals of social performance. They are not anti-life. They are pro-truth. In a world drowning in noise, they choose silence. In a world obsessed with becoming, they explore being. They do not flee life. They descend deeper into its essence than most dare to go. This kind of withdrawal demands a detachment from the narratives that define the ego. Titles, achievements, roles, identities, these become weights that must be stripped away to uncover the raw condition of the self. What am I when no one is watching? What remains when all masks are removed? These are not questions the world teaches you to ask, because the world thrives on masks. But the one who seeks liberation must learn to be naked before their own conscience. They must endure the abyss of their own emptiness without fleeing into false meaning. Only through this painful unveiling can true substance be discovered. The path of inner withdrawal also requires the renunciation of false time. Society keeps you trapped in artificial urgency, deadlines, goals, constant updates, perpetual motion. But the inner life unfolds in a different rhythm, slower, quieter, cyclical rather than linear. The one who withdraws begins to observe this secret tempo. They are not bound by the speed of the market or the chase of popularity. They learn to watch rather than rush, to listen rather than speak, to dwell rather than escape. In doing so, they reclaim the most precious thing they possess, their attention. And with this attention, the withdrawn one begins to see through the veil of appearance. They see the suffering that lies behind the smiles of others. They detect the desperation behind ambition, the insecurity behind confidence, the fear behind power. They see how most of life is performance, a play put on by wounded actors who have never paused long enough to ask who they really are. And in seeing this, compassion may arise, not sentimentality, but a cold, sharp compassion that recognizes the tragedy of unconscious living. But this vision can only emerge in the stillness that withdrawal makes possible. There is a kind of strength that comes not from assertion, but from renunciation. To turn away from the chaos of the world is not to be weak, but to choose a higher battlefield. The real struggle is not against others. It is against delusion. The fight is not to dominate, but to awaken. The one who withdraws understands that true liberation is not achieved by winning the world's game, but by realizing it is a game and refusing to play it. This refusal is not bitter, it is free. And in that freedom, the self is reborn into clarity, simplicity, and depth. The soul does not wither from labor alone. It collapses under the invisible weight of meaninglessness. Modern exhaustion is not just physical fatigue, it is spiritual erosion. It is the consequence of chasing illusions, of immersing oneself in noise, of becoming a stranger to one's own interior life. You are not just tired because of what you do, but because of what you no longer feel, what you no longer believe, and the depth you no longer visit. You were not made to serve systems. You were made to reflect, to understand, to confront the mystery of existence with sober clarity. To restore the spirit is not to recharge with more pleasure, but to strip life down to its essence. The antidote to this hollow fatigue is not found in consumption, nor in stimulation, but in stillness, in rejecting false joy, in facing the pain that modern life teaches us to ignore. Only in silence can you hear yourself again. Only through conscious suffering can you awaken from unconscious despair, and only by walking alone into yourself can you ever begin to return whole.